Hey, thanks for making it to Veterans Info Tap. I'm glad you made it. I wanted to hit on this one more time because it is, I think, important to shine a different perspective on the opinion piece done by Kyle Greenberg and Mark Duggan. Kyle Greenberg is over at West Point, Lieutenant Colonel type, and the other guy, Mark Duggan, is over at Stanford. And these two did a shameful piece on veterans compensation, and really, in my opinion, after reading the article, specifically targeting presumptive conditions. And presumptive conditions made it easier, and through the PACT Act, made it easier for burn pit exposure. And now we have these two basically smearing the name of combat veterans, and it's pretty disturbing. I'm very frustrated with it, and I think it was in extremely poor taste with little research, sadly. And I wanted to go through it one more time here and give my 2 cents along the way on this. Now, the headline says, "How Runaway Disability Compensation is Straining Veterans Affairs." That is the title, and it is by Kyle Greenberg and Mark Duggan, and they are opinion contributors to The Hill. And this came out, sadly, on Veterans Day of all days, which makes it even more shameful, in my opinion, that this article even exists. So what I'm trying to do here is to get as broad of a reach as I can to dispel some of the, in my opinion, misperceptions. Now, I'm going to start this off with, look, I'm not an economic, major, and I don't hold a degree in that, but I'm not an idiot. So there's that. I do hold a master's degree, so I do have that. I have a bachelor's in business management. I do have an MBA in human resources management. I was in the Marine Corps active duty. I was in the Army National Guard. I worked for a state military department for many years. I held multiple positions within veterans benefits, from employment stuff to homeless veteran stuff to leading basically a department for veterans services. I've been accredited with the VA. So, and not that it doesn't really matter, but because I'm talking about these two who believe that they have, turned over every stone and are preaching as though they have this all figured out, at least I'm coming from a perspective that maybe holds a little bit of weight. So with that, hit the thumbs up for me, subscribe, share with a friend, all that good stuff. I really appreciate it. And I would love to see a correction to this opinion piece by somebody else with some more clout, because this is not not right on many levels. So let's jump into it. So I'm going to read through it as fast as I can because I recently did a video on this a couple days ago, and again, just trying to get a broad reach. So I appreciate you guys listening and watching. So as we move through here, I'm going to read through it. I'm going to give you my 2 cents on some of this stuff. So as we celebrate Veterans Day, because this came out on Veterans Day, this year during the 50th anniversary of America's all-volunteer force, growing concerns about the federal debt and looming budget impasse and a crisis in military recruiting prompt us to call attention to the causes and consequences of the immense growth in the budget of the United States Department of Veterans Affairs in recent years. From 2000 to 2022, the overall VA budget grew from $76 billion to $267 billion, despite a 28% decline in the veteran population over the same period. So we'll stop there. Great. Yes, the veteran population is decreasing rapidly. However, we're on the heels of the 20-year Gulf War, of which information is now more accessible than ever. So as a result, there is an increase in veterans utilizing the benefits in which they have earned. There are no handouts, by the way. So this is the first piece that's irritating. Yes, there is a 28% decline in the veteran population. However, more veterans than ever are actually accessing VA benefits in which they have earned. So let's move on. As a result, the annual spending by the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs per veteran has almost quintupled from $3,000 to $14,300, which in my opinion is irrelevant as far as an argument is concerned, because you should be happy that more veterans who deserve the benefits. Now, look, granted, there's always going to be a bad apple. There's going to be somebody who screws over the system. That's with every single benefit type program, every single thing that is out there that will help happen. And that is always taken into account when you're running any sort of these types of programs. However, the vast majority in the upper 90 percentile is going to be true and correct. Period. Some of this growth has been driven by an aging veteran population, rising healthcare prices, and much needed improvements to the VA healthcare facilities. But the biggest contributor, here's where they start to dig in. But the biggest contributor to the VA steadily expanding budget has been the unprecedented increase in veterans enrollment in disability compensation, a VA program designed to compensate America's veterans for injuries incurred or aggravated during their military service. And here's the first mistake, or another mistake. No, it's not just for injuries, it's also for diseases and other illnesses that are chronic in nature or have residual effects. So it's not just injuries, first of all, and kudos to the VA for actually getting more veterans enrolled. There has been a stigma for many, many, many years about the VA in general, about obtaining benefits. There's been misperceptions and unclear criteria to receive these benefits. And now, thank goodness, with the ease of information gathering, veterans are actually able to see what they qualify for and have earned during their service. Much like you there, Lieutenant Colonel, because I guarantee you when you get out, you will be seeking your VA compensation. All right, let's move on. So, moving on here, it says that the share of veterans receiving disability compensation benefits is increasing rapidly and is at an all-time high. Between 1954 and 2000, okay, the dark ages, right? Think about internet access in the 1990s, and so now they're taking us right up to the year 2000. Okay, we were worried. Remember, we were worried that the computer systems were going to crash and, lights were going to be out and ATM machines weren't going to work, right? So this is the dark ages as far as information was concerned, especially for veterans. I got out in 1997 from the Marine Corps active duty in California, and I wasn't given really much information about the VA other than I had to file a claim. I actually thought that it was part of the out processing process with getting out of the military. So, of course, those numbers are going to be very low. And you're talking about the greatest generation, which was very much a rub dirt on it, move forward, don't complain. So they weren't looking to take advantage of these benefits, especially back then. It wasn't until much later on, sadly, in the last years of their lives, where they were seeking additional benefits to survive and take the strain off of the family. So let's jump back into this. Between 1954 and 2000, the share of veterans receiving disability compensation was very stable, because nobody was using it, because nobody understood. Fluctuating, and look at how the Vietnam vets were treated. They just wanted to be not involved with the government whatsoever for many years. So of course it was stable, fluctuating between 8% and 10%. Today, nearly 30% of the country's 18.5 million veterans receive it. Now, anybody who's receiving VA veterans disability compensation understands, at least most people, understand what is entailed and what is qualifiable as far as a service connection is concerned with regard to their disability compensation. And I can guarantee you that the majority of the 30% of veterans who are receiving VA compensation would estimate more than 50% of veterans should qualify for something, even at a 10% rating. So here is another just doesn't mean anything sort of statistic. Good, in fact, that the VA is now at 30% of veterans receiving disability compensation, because it means the word's getting out about the benefits that have been ignored, forgotten, and not sought after our time in service. So let's move on. Additionally, the average annual payment of veterans receiving disability has increased substantially from about $12,000 in the year 2000 to $21,000 today. Well, did you account for cost of living adjustments? We've had 10% in the last 2 years adjustment there. In addition, you also have people who have worsening conditions that have signed up and are receiving service connection disability payments that now have increases that they filed for their conditions, or secondary conditions start to arise. So their overall ratings, in addition to the COLA, are also increasing. So they could take those numbers and shove that as well. Let's move on. This growth has been driven by a shift to a much higher disability rating, since payments are higher for those who are found to be more disabled. Okay, so what's the suggestion there, Kyle? Is your suggestion, well, people who are more disabled should be paid less? Because that seems pretty dumb. So, stupid argument. Let's move on. From the year 2000 to 2022, the overall VA budget grew from $76 billion to $267 billion in 2022, despite a 30% decline from 26.4 million to 18.4 million in the veteran population over the same period. So again, I go back to, yes, the percentage of veterans has dropped. Or not the percentage of veterans. The veteran population has dropped. However, the increase in veterans utilizing VA compensation because of awareness of the VA benefits that they have earned is actually more prevalent now, right? More people are aware of what benefits they have, and they're actually seeking them because they earned them. It's part of the Code of Federal Regulations, Kyle. So you do the monkey math and figure it out. Before it was stable, you said, between 8 to 10% of veterans were utilizing VA benefits. Now we're at 30% of veterans utilizing VA benefits. However, the veteran population decreased. So you answered your own question before this. So you're making this sound like this is so confusing. You already figured it out. As a result, annual spending by the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs per veteran has quintupled from $2,900 to $14,500. Again, why? Why per veteran has it gone up? Veteran was in for service connection for conditions. Those conditions got worse. They filed for increases. They also found out that, guess what? They had secondary conditions arise, so they filed for those. Then the amount of COLAs have increased the spending as well over that period of time. So you're talking about a 22-year time frame. Some of this growth has been driven by an aging veteran population, rising healthcare prices, and much needed improvements to the VA healthcare facilities. Okay, with total annual disability compensation expenditures increasing from $28 billion to $112 billion, VA spending on the program is now 83% as large as for Social Security disability insurance, the largest federal disability program that insures 10 times as many adults. Okay, let's compare apples to oranges. Irrelevant. This isn't even an argument to anything. So it's just filler. It's to try to sound smart and dazzle you with more numbers. It doesn't mean shit, Kyle. So you can delete that because it doesn't matter. Because those 10 times as many of adults weren't covered under the VA for serving our nation and earned those benefits under the VA for VA disability compensation. A whole different situation and scale, not to be compared and contrasted with Social Security disability insurance. Dumb. All right. Moreover, Since veterans who receive disability compensation benefits have increased eligibility for the VA's healthcare services, the program's rise in enrollment has simultaneously contributed to substantial increase in healthcare spending by the VA. No kidding. It's their job. Their goal, the VA's goal, is to get their mission statement, is to get us taken care of, and that includes healthcare. Go figure. In comparison, the annual VA spend. So so again, the complaint is that money is being spent too rapidly at the VA. If you're complaining about it, that means, Kyle, that you are looking to look for ways to lower it. Now you're complaining here about the rise in healthcare costs from the VA for that spend on veterans. And what does that mean? That means that you're suggesting lowering that spend for the veterans that served and are service-connected for conditions by the VA. It just sounds ignorant. All right, let's move on. In comparison, annual VA spending on education benefits such as the GI Bill is just $10 billion, and annual spending on veterans readiness and employment, a program designed to help veterans with service-connected disabilities obtain stable and suitable employment, is only $1.5 billion. Yes, you know what? You're right, and I agree. That's a problem. That number, especially for the veterans readiness and employment, should be much higher, in fact. All right, so let's move on. The primary driver of the growth in disability compensation enrollment has been a series of regulatory and policy changes over the past 2 decades, including the most recent 2022 PACT Act, that have made it steadily easier for veterans to apply for and qualify for disability benefits for a broader set of medical conditions. So, for those that don't know, because please to God, I hope that people are watching this that have no clue. So, the PACT Act, yes, has made it much easier for some Vietnam veterans, for Gulf War veterans, and for some veterans that have been exposed to toxic water at Camp Lejeune, who were stationed there for more than 30 days, and have specific conditions that were medically proven to be most likely caused by their exposure to Agent Orange, burn pits, the bad water, and made it easier if they have cancers or other diseases that were medically proven to be most likely caused by these conditions. What's your suggestion, Kyle? Make it more difficult for these combat veterans and veterans that served in Camp Lejeune drinking nasty water? Make it more difficult for them? I'd love to hear it. Please. Because you're calling out the PACT Act, 2022 PACT Act, that made it steadily easier for veterans to apply for and qualify for disability benefits for a broader set of medical conditions. Those are the conditions that are made easier, these presumptives. So are you saying to the Vietnam veterans, are you saying to the Gulf War veterans who have these ailments, are you saying that it should be more difficult, or that they shouldn't receive any of this at all? That they just, that Congress should just change the law and just, blacklist these people? Because it seems to me like this is what you're complaining about. I could be wrong, but just reading the way this is, unless they took your opinion contribution here and changed it up for you, I don't know. I'd love to hear it. So as the result, these changes, nearly 40% of veterans who served in 1990 or later receive disability compensation benefits. Good. 40% of veterans are actually aware of what benefits exist from the VA other than home loan and education. Good on them. And guess what? The VA is still trying to spread the word, share the information. Do they do a good job? That's debatable. But the idea is that the VA still feels that they're not doing a good enough job getting the word out. So I don't understand. Are you saying that more people should just rub dirt on it, Lieutenant Colonel? You saying more people should just rub dirt on it, turn the other cheek and move forward? Because that's kind of what it sounds like. It sounds like you're pissed off that 40% of veterans who served 1990 or later, which I'm one, are receiving disability compensation. Because it's written in the law and they are going for the benefits that they deserved. Tell you what, when you retire, Lieutenant Colonel, leave half of your retirement check on the table because I don't think you deserve it. I think the DOD needs to keep that money. So so let's move on. While one might attribute these high rates of disability compensation receipt to improved battlefield medicine, so that doesn't make sense. So you're attributing high rates of disability compensation to improved battlefield medicine and long-term effects of combat deployment. So the first part doesn't improved battlefield medicine would probably decrease the rates of disability compensation, unless you're saying like if they died. So okay, so if what you're referring to here is, okay, the battlefield medicine kept somebody alive, so now they come back and file for VA disability. I mean, that's the only way you can really take that. And the long-term effects of combat deployments to Iraq, Afghanistan, research would suggest otherwise, which you don't really dive into it. Then it goes on to say, veterans who enlisted since 2010 have some of the highest rates of disability compensation enrollment, even though they were significantly less likely to deploy and faced a substantially lower risk of injury while deployed. Only 1% of Army service members who enlisted between 2010 and 2015 were wounded in combat. Newsflash, Lieutenant Colonel. It's not just combat injuries, period. I know in the Marine Corps, we trained hard all the time. People got hurt. On a forced march, I had a guy fall over and rip off his finger, right? Things happen, okay? So and beyond injuries, which I said at the beginning, guess what? You're helping to push this false narrative of the VA only will cover you if you have an injury for disability compensation. So that's a false narrative. The VA will cover you for illnesses and diseases that are chronic in nature or have residual effects. This includes things like gastroesophageal reflux disease, migraines, arthritis, right? So there is a whole list. Maybe you should read through the schedule of ratings before you make an ignorant comment and hyper focus on injuries only, because again, you are complaining about the VA's spend. You're complaining about the VA's spend specifically on disability compensation, but you're only talking about a small little fragment of all of it, which in this paragraph is you're pointing to combat related injuries, really, is what you're focused on. So, okay, what about all the rest? That's dumb. So the reason it went up, Kyle, is because people are more aware of the compensation, disability compensation from the VA and what they are actually entitled, it's a big word, entitled to due to their service, right? Or because of their service. Let's move on. Considering how much easier it has become to qualify for disability I can't even say that. So considering how much easier it has become to qualify for disability benefits, it is perhaps unsurprising that 5,000 pilots, and this is just a really crappy transition into this. So let's just stop it there. So considering how much easier it has become to qualify for disability benefits, we'll stop there. Again, I can only go back to your limited knowledge and really only focusing on the fact that you're calling out presumptive conditions. So I think it's disgraceful and very, very tasteless. It's a horrific picture that you're painting, that combat veterans from Vietnam and combat veterans from the whole Gulf War stuff, because there's just so many locations, and those that were exposed to contaminated drinking water because they have a slightly easier path to service connection for some reason. That shouldn't happen. I mean, the only thing you could be saying here is that they shouldn't have that. They shouldn't have it easier. In fact, they should probably have it more difficult, and we should probably deny a lot of these so that way we could save some money. And you know what? With that behavior, I truly hope that you don't make it to Colonel, because it starts to turn a lot more political, and you are definitely not somebody that we as a veteran and military community need fighting for us, because you are on the wrong side of the fence with any of this. And it's very sad. And the Army is at a disadvantage with you in its ranks. So let's move on. Considering how much easier it has become to qualify for disability benefits, it is perhaps unsurprising that 5,000 pilots who passed their Federal Aviation Administration physicals are now under investigation for receiving veterans disability benefits for conditions that should disqualify them from the cockpit. So, look, I'm not a pilot, never was a pilot, flew in helicopters, that was about it. So, I don't have much room to speak to that. I do know that story, and I did do a video on that when the FAA, the Federal Aviation whole thing went down. So I did talk with a pilot buddy of mine, and he said that, you know, the stuff, it's not apples to apples, and there definitely is, you know, some things in there that might not exactly line up, and some things that would line up. And it's going to definitely be a case-by-case thing. I think that, sure, they're doing their due diligence to make sure that somebody is not behind the theoretical wheel of an aircraft, and good, sure. You should make sure that everything's good to go. You know, I don't want to be in a plane or a helicopter with somebody who shouldn't be flying it. But there's going to be plenty of people that still pass the exam. So, you know, it's a little bit, I don't know. This is just another. This has nothing to do with his argument, other than the fact of the picture that he's trying to paint, that, look, 5,000 pilots are either A, screwing over the VA and lying, or 5,000 pilots are screwing over the FAA and lying to them. So he's just trying to paint veterans in this case as liars, really, one way or the other. So which I don't appreciate either, because sure, they're under investigation to figure out if they can fly or not. Do I want to go out and call these people liars? No. That is a totally unfair thing to say. And this is his roundabout way of saying that. Tell me that he's not. All right, so let's move on. So why is this a problem? Extra money from the disability compensation program may improve some veterans' economic well-being. However, previous research by both of us, the two contributors on this, which is Mark Duggan and Kyle Greenberg, Mark Duggan with Stanford and Kyle Greenberg over at West Point, and with other co-authors, have demonstrated that disability compensation has significantly lowered veterans' employment. I would love to know the research, please. Tell me the research that you looked for and looked at and what have you. Because there aren't very many places that you can live even on 100%. Very well, anyway. So the program's impact, especially when you look at the populations of where veterans are. So your top 3 states for veterans is California, Texas, and Florida. And guess what? They're all not living in the middle of nowhere in these states. Okay? It's expensive to live even in Texas. You know, look at any of the metro areas. It's not like you're not buying something for $100,000 in a metro area. So moving on. So they've done research. I'd love to see it. I'd love to know about it. The program's impact on health is also mixed. Despite the increase in disability compensation enrollment and corresponding growth in the VA expenditures, veterans' mental health measured by suicide rates has deteriorated relative to non-veterans of the same age and gender. Another trend is that it is not explained by combat deployments. Okay. Now they're just saying that, so they're lumping health all together to include mental health. So the studies that I have seen, and whatever, to each their own, but the studies that the VA touts that were done, tout the VA healthcare is far better for veterans than other places out there. Now, is every place the best? No. Are there going to be some crappy ones? Sure. I'm in the belief of, it's the people, not the organization. So you can have some really great people at one VA facility, you can have some not so great people at another facility. Whatever. It is what it is. It's just another kind of misguided poke at funding. So let's move on. While some recent studies find evidence that disability compensation improves engagement in preventative care and may decrease hospitalizations among Vietnam-era veterans with diabetes, there is little evidence that it reduces veterans' mortality or improves their measurable health outcomes. Well, I will tell you that if you were to, let's just pretend, take away all veterans' compensation, I guarantee you that depression would rise, homelessness would rise, illness due to increased insomnia due to stress and anxiety is going to rise. Hospitalizations will rise. I guarantee it. I don't even need a study. Anybody, a monkey can figure that one out. So I'm not quite sure exactly what you're saying here, because if you look at it from the other lens, which I just said, you're saying that money doesn't change anything, and I'm saying take it all away, and I guarantee it will. So let's refute that, please, and let's move on. Also, by the way, when you have a veteran who's connected with the VA for service-connected conditions, they're more likely to go and continue to be seen for those conditions with the VA, to continue to have a record for them and so forth, which means that they're going to have other conversations and potentially catch other issues and bring those up at their doctor's appointments as well. Versus somebody who's not connected at all with the VA, won't go and might not go. They'll just rub dirt on it. They're not going to pay extra money to go to a civilian doctor and so forth. So I don't really see it. Let's move on. And if disability compensation's growth is attributed to the deteriorations in veterans' health rather than the policies that make it easier for veterans to qualify for disability, then it may inadvertently feed a broken veteran narrative that contributes to the military's worst recruiting crisis since the advent of the all-volunteer force. So let's read that again. If disability compensation's growth is attributed to deteriorations in veterans' health, rather than to policies that make it easier for veterans to qualify for disability. So again, here he's targeting presumptives. That's the only thing that I could ascertain, because he doesn't really specifically say what he's talking about, except for the PACT Act. And in the PACT Act, there were additions of many presumptive conditions, which made it easier, and that's what the PACT Act touted. It makes it easier for these specific veterans. So, because these presumptive conditions are easier to obtain, he's saying that we are inadvertently feeding a broken veteran narrative that contributes to the military's worst recruiting crisis, which I disagree with. So let's move on. In fact, a recent survey cites concerns about physical injury and psychological distress as the top two reasons youth do not consider joining the military. So first of all, I do not agree with, and I don't know the survey, but if the survey is a blanket of all high schoolers, for example. Look, how many percent join the military? What is the percent? It's like 1% or something, right? So if it's a very low percentage, guess what? Everybody else is already not going to join anyway. So you need to figure out, for that type of a survey, who are the most likely to join, right? Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts would be one, people in those organizations. Maybe ROTC, JROTC involvement, maybe children of veterans, right? That type of stuff. So if you were to select a group of people at a specific age range that were more likely to join, then ask them why they would or wouldn't join, then you're going to get a more true answer, right? But if you just throw it out to, 5,000 kids in a high school, at some big high school with 5,000 kids in it, you're going to get, 4,500 super, responses that don't even count. So you need to be more specific, and I don't know exactly what survey that is. So anyway, moving on. Unfortunately, such narratives crowd out other research which find that Army service increases average earning in 19 years. So then it just goes on a little bit about increasing, after Army service, blah, blah. Moving on. If VA spending per veteran had remained the same in inflation-adjusted terms, okay, good. Didn't mention that in other previous mentions of money and differences. So now we're actually including that. So I hate when people use it and don't use it depending on their own, I don't know. If you're trying to use it to build your argument in some cases and then not use it in other ways, that bothers me. So if VA spending per veteran had remained the same in inflation-adjusted terms since 2000, its total budget would have been about $60 billion in 2022, rather than $267 billion, and growing rapidly. We are not arguing for cuts to the VA's budget, okay? So then what are you complaining about? On the contrary, broad bipartisan support for veterans, including generous spending for veterans' healthcare, education benefits, and other supportive services, may help explain why military service increases earnings and why combat deployments, though they increase soldiers' immediate risk of death and injury, have few harmful long-term effects on well-being. Okay, then let's move on. But it's time to ask if an increasingly generous disability compensation program that has significantly reduced employment among our veterans, I'd love to know the numbers, and bears no resemblance to the program that existed throughout the latter half of the 20th century, which I'm not sure when presumptives first started. Pretty sure they started later on. I'd love to know specifically what he's talking about, because he doesn't specifically call out the differences, which is frustrating. So let's move on. Is the best way to reward and honor America's veterans while also inspiring today's young adults to serve their country in the armed forces. And then that ends it. So basically what he's saying is that it bears no resemblance. So the VA compensation process bears no resemblance to the latter half of the 20th century. I'd like to know if that's true. I mean, I think it's basically very close to the same, with the exception of presumptives, which make it easier for primarily combat veterans who have medical conditions that are proven to be more than likely a result of their service. So again, it all twists back to that. And it sounds like that is the cornerstone of his argument, which is just in very poor taste. I would love to know, because although there's research in this, I would love to know what the research was, because I don't. Tell me how it bears no resemblance. Tell me what it was to what it is and why that's bad. Break it down Barney style, because you're not. And the only thing that I can ascertain out of all of this is that you have a big problem with presumptive conditions, and that's horrific. So with that, we'll go ahead and conclude it there. I'd love to see your comments. Thanks so much for watching. I appreciate you. Have a great one, and remember, if we don't take care of each other, something went wrong.